welcome you to another live edition of the Sports Box, brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And by our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and check them out at www.crowdplayapp.com for details. Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Friday night's special edition of the Sweet Tea Show here on the Sports Box. I'm here with Noah Dog Deibler himself and Garth Charger Patrick here, bringing you guys what should be a great show tonight. We got a lot going on. Noah, free agency has been unreal. Baseball is coming to a start. NBA trade deadline. Formula One is starting this weekend. So we got a lot to talk about and go over and be excited for. So glad to have you here as always, Noah, and I'm glad for everybody tuning in. Let's have a heck of a night, guys.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Glad to be here as always. And, a lot of stuff going on. I saw some crazy trades today that I was not expecting. I'm sure we'll get into that as well. A lot of stuff has gone on in the 2 weeks we've been away. So, let's not waste any time. Let's just get right into it.
Yeah, most definitely. And, we'll go ahead and jump right into some NFL free agency. As you did say, there were some probably more unexpected moves today. The Dolphins, and what started with Laramie Tunsil going to the Houston Texans have turned that into, quite frankly, probably the best trading of an offensive lineman ever in NFL history with what they've gotten out of this. And then with the San Francisco 49ers, despite saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is still their guy moving forward, trade up to that number 3 spot and are firmly in quarterback talks. We expect Trevor Lawrence, obviously, to go number 1 overall Jacksonville Jaguars, but guys like Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, are all going to be potentially available at that number 3 spot. And I wouldn't be shocked if they're taking a quarterback. I don't see why you move up to number 3 now if you aren't taking a quarterback. What's kind of your reaction and your thought on that situation?
Well, see, Garth, I agree with you. The only problem is I saw a quote earlier today on ESPN, and it didn't say who the source was, but they did say that the 49ers do want to keep Jimmy Garoppolo as their guy. So I think what's going to happen is you don't trade up 9 picks if you're not, unless it's a fantastic, once-generation talent, you're trading up that high probably for a quarterback. So I think what they want to do is potentially maybe draft a guy to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, not take over right away, but maybe sit behind him for a bit. Because you got to remember, Jimmy Garoppolo has a massive contract, 5 years, $137 million. That's not something they can just get rid of. So I think he's still going to be the starter in 2021. But I definitely agree with you. I think they could take a quarterback here to potentially groom for the future. Obviously, I think Trevor Lawrence will go number 1. And then, you're kind of looking at guys like you mentioned, Trey Lance. I think Zach Wilson and obviously Justin Fields, if he falls that far, would be in play. But, yeah, just incredible trade by the Miami Dolphins, in my opinion. They got a lot of picks out of it. We'll go into more detail on that in a minute, but I was definitely not expecting a trade like this, Garth, honestly. Trades like this, I usually expect them on draft night. For it to happen March 26th, well over a month before the draft, or, around a month before is crazy. That was just stunning, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and obviously the only other player outside of a quarterback that I could see somebody moving up to, to that number 3 spot would be potentially Kyle Pitts. But, obviously the 49ers have a guy there at tight end position in George Kittle. I don't think that, that's their reasoning. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that they're most definitely going after a quarterback. Which quarterback specifically, we'll have to wait and see. I do know there's a lot of rumors going around that the 49ers GM was at Zach Wilson's pro day, and potentially that could be the guy that they're going after. But like I said, we're going to have to wait and see because we won't even know if he's going to be available at number 3 until draft day. And we could even see them trade up to number 2, if they really feel that they need to and they're really after one specific guy. But overall, getting really excited as the draft is coming up next month. A lot of pro days coming out. We've all been seeing highlights of pro days and guys running insane times and, passes. That pass by Zach Wilson yesterday, unfortunately, I don't have the video, but he was rolling out and basically threw off his back foot across his body right on the spot, 50 yards down the field. It was insane. I honestly didn't know that he had the kind of arm that he does have. So, that whole rumor with the 49ers GM and potentially wanting Zach Wilson it doesn't surprise me at all after the pro day that he had, Noah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Zach Wilson, he's that kind of quarterback prospect. They happen at least one or two every year. They just come out of nowhere. Before the season, we were still obviously talking about guys like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, and then Zach Wilson has this season. It's kind of like, I don't want to say he was as good as Joe Burrow, but it was kind of like Joe Burrow, to where he came out of nowhere and just skyrocketed up the ranks. And obviously had a great season for BYU. But this is a guy that a few months ago, back in August or July, and no one would probably even know who he is. And now I've seen mock drafts with him going as high as number 2, and consistently in the top 5, and definitely in the top 10. So I would be shocked if he falls past the 49ers, because if it goes how I think it's going to go, and potentially you have Lawrence and Fields go 1 and 2, I think they're going to take a quarterback. And I would probably take Zach Wilson over Trey Lance, even though I do like Trey Lance. I don't think he's a top 5 guy. So, yeah, I mean, that quote, the 49ers wanting Wilson, I wouldn't be surprised at all, because I think he might be, by that pick, the best quarterback left.
So I pulled up the exact trade deal here now, and one thing that really does surprise me is just how much the Dolphins got in exchange for this. Obviously, the number 3 pick in the draft is huge. It's very important, especially if you're going after a franchise quarterback. We see year in, year out that these guys, at least the guys that everybody's talking about, everybody wants on their team, are going within the first 5 picks in the draft. Just last year with Tua, Herbert, and Burrow, we saw them all go within the first 5. But, they traded the number 12 overall pick for a 3rd-round pick in this year's draft and a 1st round next year and a 1st round the year after. That to me is giving up a lot for the number 3 overall, especially like I said, and you mentioned, Jimmy Garoppolo is still there under a massive contract that they, just got forged, it seems like yesterday, but it has been a couple seasons now, to go up to number 3 and to give that much up. So if you are going after a quarterback, like we said, you got to see something special. Like, this has got to be your guy moving forward. And maybe the whole Jimmy Garoppolo thing could potentially just be a bluff, Like my GM on the Chargers, Tom Telesco, he likes to say a lot of things and then do the exact opposite, kind of like a smoke screen towards other teams to not let them know your true intentions. But, just a huge trade, a lot given up by the 49ers to move up to number 3.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is, Garth, Jimmy Garoppolo, he has 2 years left in his contract. But when I'm looking at the details in a more specific lens, for a contract that massive, a lot of the dead cap was actually early on in the contract. Like in 2018, he would have had $42 million. Now they can basically get rid of him for as little, basically at no cost. So I think they will stick with him, because you don't give a guy a 5-year contract with that much money and just trade him away, unless you're just stupid like the Eagles are when they traded Carson Wentz and took on $40 million in dead cap. But I don't think they'll get rid of him. But I think you're right. I think they will take quarterback, because to move up from number 12 to number 3, and like you said, they gave up 2022 and 23, they gave up both their 1st-round picks there to the Dolphins. I mean, what a snag by the Dolphins. Obviously, they also made that trade with the Eagles. So now where it's sitting at right now, they have number 6 and number 18 for this year. They traded away their own 1st in 2022, but they have the 49ers 1st. So they still have a 1st there. And then in 2023, they have their own 1st and San Francisco's 1st, which means in the next 3 years, they have 5 1st-round picks. Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but you and a lot of people know me. I'm a big fan of Brian Flores here. I think him and Chris Greer right here have just completely robbed the 49ers, basically, because 49ers, if they wanted a number 3 pick, Garth, maybe this is an unpopular opinion, I don't think they should have won so many meaningless games at the end of the year, because they went 6-10. If they went something like 3-13 or 4-12, they could have gotten the number 3 overall pick and not had to trade away 2 future 1st-round picks and, basically say, okay, we're fucking up our future drafts just to get this guy we wanted. When if they really want him that bad, I think they could have just tanked. So, I think the 49ers just messed this up really badly.
Yeah, and I got to agree there with one thing that I would like to point out real quickly before I touch on some comments here is just how important 1st-round picks are becoming. I feel like every season, they're just a little bit more and more important, because what we're seeing especially for skill positions, quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, and even certain positions like defensive ends or outside linebackers who can pass rush. The market value of players just seems to keep going up and up. Like every year, I feel like we're seeing multiple guys, being the highest paid player at their position ever. And, that just makes the draft so much more valuable. If you're able to get somebody in the first round who can be, a day one impact on your team, and you can get the most out of that player for 2 to 3 seasons before you have to re-sign them for huge money. Obviously every million of dollars counts towards the cap. So if you have good players, just like we say, in the NHL with Braden Point on the deal he's on, you've always hammered that home. If you can have somebody who is a huge contributor to the team, very talented, just having a huge impact week in, week out, and they're still on something like a rookie, very lucrative. Obviously, that's a huge advantage in a sport where money counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, not to beat a dead horse again, Garth, but I think a team like your Chargers realized that. And that's what they did when they got Justin Herbert. They got him in. He's on that rookie deal. He's playing very well. But they need to use some of that money that they've saved from that rookie contract and start to get some people around him. And I've seen them make some good deals. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just a lot to give up. And I understand it's the most important position in football. If you don't have a good quarterback, you're not going to do anything unless you got a defense like the 2000 Ravens or the 85 Bears or something like that. But it's just a lot to give up, and I think that they kind of made it a lot harder for themselves by winning, some meaningless games where they already well eliminated from playoff contention. So overall, I'd say great job by the Miami Dolphins. The Eagles moved up to number 6, so they should be pretty happy with that. But big losers for me, the San Francisco 49ers. I think they messed us up horribly.
Yeah, and like I said, no, I got to agree with you. They just gave up. I understand wanting to move up in the draft, but it seems like they gave up a lot, especially, like I said, with how important first-round draft picks are nowadays. But yeah, let's touch on some comments here real quick. No, I don't mean to ignore you guys. In the comments come in. A first-time viewer, at least that I've seen, Robert saying he wants us to talk some fantasy baseball and that it is baseball season. Leave the football for August, which he makes a valid point there. However, I know the draft is next month, and we have a lot of people excited. And free agency has just been giving us too much excitement not to talk about it. And then our guy Brian, he's got a question here for you, Noah. Pitt's at number 4, which for those of you who don't know, the Atlanta Falcons, Noah's favorite team there, is picking at number 4. And what's your thoughts on that, Noah? Do you see Kyle Pitts going at number 4 to your Falcons?
I think he's a great player, don't get me wrong, and obviously that's hard for me to say because I hate the Florida Gators, but I think he's a fantastic player. I don't know if I'd take him at number 4. It's just really tough, and I think Brian can test this. When you have so many positions that you need on your, let's say, offensive line and defense, it's really hard for me to want to take a skills position player because I don't think our skills positions are the problem, Garth. In fact, I think they're one of the few strengths of our team. Now, obviously, we still have Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. I think Russell Gage was a really good number 3 receiver for us last year. They just need to, if they want to take someone, you got to be absolutely sure about it because this is the highest pick we've had since we drafted Matt Ryan. They can't get it wrong. I personally, if I'm going off BPA, I would probably take a guy like Micah Parsons if he's still there. Or if you want to take a quarterback, that's fine. I'm not too sure about Kyle Pitts because I think he's a fantastic player. But I don't know if I'd use the number 4 pick on him. And, obviously you're a Florida fan. Maybe you could give me some more insight on him. I know he's a fantastic player and all that, but I'm not sure if I want to spend a number 4 pick on him.
Yeah, and I don't blame you there. No, I regardless of who the player is, I do feel like, just from a non-biased standpoint, it's very hard to justify taking a tight end at number 4. Granted, there is players like Travis Kelce and George Kittle, as I mentioned earlier, in the league, but outside of them, how many tight ends are there right now that, you can say put up incredible numbers year in, year out and have, a huge impact on a team winning and, how good the offense is. So, is he worth a number 4 pick in the draft? Yes. I feel like he does have that talent, that ceiling to be that type of player. But at the same time, as you said, Noah, when you do have so many needs across the board, it's really hard to put a tight end over all of those needs for sure. Josh with a pretty funny comment here. I got to go ahead and put this up real quick, saying that if you guys do take a tight end at number 4 in the first round, I'm turning my power off of my TV. And we've talked about it the past few weeks. My Chargers have very similar needs to your guys' Falcons. So I definitely get that. I would love for Pitts to fall to us at 13. It's not happening, unfortunately. He did just run a 4.46 the other day. And for anybody who doesn't know, this is a dude who's 6'6" and like 240, 245. So to be running 4.46 and moving the way that guy does is, it's unreal. Just a little bit of insight on him. He is marked down as a tight end. A lot of people kind of wonder if he's going to be playing wide receiver. Actually, me and Josh talked about a little bit the other day in our group chat. Is he going to maybe potentially switch to wide receiver in the league? I don't believe so. I think that he's just too big. His play style is definitely suited more of a tight end. He likes to go across the middle and make those contested catches. And, he definitely, despite the size advantage he does have on DBs, I feel like his biggest mismatch is against linebackers who aren't superb in coverage, because whenever you're going to put a linebacker on him who isn't a coverage specialist, they're getting burnt. And like I told Josh, where that comes from is his junior season. He did play in the slot a lot. He did line up the majority of his snaps, at wide receiver position, despite being marked down as a tight end. But in the offseason between his junior and senior seasons, he did work very hard on bulking up, adding some muscle so that he could play in the line of scrimmage a lot more. And I expect him to further work on that, along his NFL career. I definitely see him being a tight end, Noah. But like I said, you probably won't be taking him at number 4. I just, if your philosophy is best player available, then yeah, maybe you do take him. But like you said, there's a lot of needs there across the
Yeah, it is really tough to predict because obviously we have no idea what's going to happen. The Falcons could trade down. You just never know. I know Terry Fontenot, from what I've heard, has a tendency to do that. I have no doubt he could definitely go to the Falcons. He could definitely go in the top 5. He's that type of player. But I'm with you. I think he will probably stay a tight end because, like you said, he is 6'6", 240. That type of frame is just really good for a tight end, and I don't really see him being a wide receiver. Now, what I think a team that drafts him might do is, just because you draft a guy in his position says tight end doesn't mean you always have to line him up next to an offensive lineman and have him block. They can still put him out in the slot if they want. Jimmy Graham comes to mind. I'm not saying he's like Jimmy Graham, play style or whatever, but you can play these guys out like a wide receiver if you want to. And I think he has that kind of talent. I don't see him as a guy that, is just going to consistently be a wide receiver, but I could see him being used in some sets like that. Absolutely. I think he's that type of talent. Like you said, the combine numbers are off the charts. Obviously, combine numbers, they tell you something, but you don't want to use them to solely judge your player. But he's also a fantastic player, as we've seen on the field. So, yeah, he's going to go very high, I have no doubt. I just personally would not probably take him because I think we have a lot bigger issues than our skills positions.
Yeah, and Brian with a comment here that I do agree with, that he's saying if you were to take Pitts, that would be the we're all in with Ryan and Julio for 1 or 2 last runs move to me. Absolutely agree there, most definitely.
Yeah, it kind of be like, all right, we're going to give up 50 points, but we'll score 51, I think, because definitely that offense would be insane if they could protect Matt Ryan, which obviously for them is easier said than done. It'd be very hard to stop. I still have concerns about the defense, but we'll see, Garth. Obviously a new coach, a new GM. It's very hard to predict what they're going to do, especially when like I said, they could always trade down. They could even trade up. I don't think they do that, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and Josh, adding to that you guys have lost too many pieces on defense to make any run right now. I think our rebuild will begin, or at least soon. And that kind of adds to that whole, well, we probably won't be able to play any defense, but we're going to for you every game. But yeah, like I said, Noah, from an outsider looking in, not really an expert or anything on the Atlanta Falcons or their needs, I would say that if you do take Pitts, it's definitely because he's still available at number 4 and it is the best player on the board, and that you have a lot of confidence that you're going to still be able to win now with Julio and Calvin Ridley and Matt Ryan.
Yeah, it's really tough, Gar, because I think when, if like Brian said there, if we want to, take Pitts and go for it with Matt Ryan and Julio, I think the problem is I don't see us as a win now team anymore. And, obviously it's easy to say that when you look at the record 4-12 and all that, but they've just had a lot of games where they've had opportunities to win and they just blow it right at the end. And, I don't think they're as bad as the record says, but I think they have a lot of flaws. And I do think Dan Quinn was some of that. But when Raheem Morris came in, I think his record was something like 4-7. So it's not like we were great with him either. I think that in my opinion, obviously this is just my opinion. I'm not saying, these players are lazy or anything like that, but I think they did lack a bit of discipline because they made a lot of mistakes. And Dan Quinn, he's not the type of coach that's going to yell at you or anything like that. He wants to be popular with his players. He's like Pete Carroll that way. I think he got that from him. But the problem is he doesn't, I'm not saying you want to yell at your players, but a lot of times, when we'd have a terrible play and it cost us a game, he'd just be over here doing the Jason Garrett and stuff like that. And me personally, that's not the kind of guy I want a head coach. I want a guy that can lay into his players a bit, tell them when they mess up, because you can't mess up and keep blowing these games that are easily winnable. We had so many games last year, Garth. I can just think of a few, Dallas, Detroit, Chicago. That's 3 games right there I just thought of. I'm sure there's way more. New Orleans, those games are close. They could have won those games as well if they didn't play complete shit in them. They need to get that together. And I don't think we're in a position to say, we can just make a run if we take Kyle Pitts or anything like that. But I'm hoping they improve, obviously. Hopefully, Arthur Smith can get him doing well, because I think, I've heard that he did a good job in Tennessee. So we need to reestablish a running game, need to rebuild the defense. I don't think it's going to be easy. We don't have a lot of cap space. They have tried to sign a lot of players to cheap deals, and I've liked some of the moves. But, it's hard to predict with Atlanta.
Yeah, and like I've said, it's very odd, despite rooting for teams across the map, just how many parallels there are in terms of needs, and how similar of seasons both my Chargers and your Falcons did have. And I will say that one thing that we've done so far in free agency that I really haven't seen you guys doing is addressing the O-line, which I'll get more into that, a little bit further into the show. I don't want to touch on that quite yet, but I am happy we finally are investing in the O-line. But you mentioned Art Smith there, and our good friend Brad Mangold is tuning in, and he actually, right before you talked on that, was mentioning that it's Art Smith time there in Atlanta. But yeah, one of the other, shifting gears here a little bit, one of the other big news that we had, today is that the Baltimore Ravens finally agreed to terms with a wide receiver, Noah. I know one of the biggest supporting things for Lamar Jackson and his woes and struggles with passing the ball is he doesn't have a true number 1 receiver. The Ravens agreed with Sammy Watkins today after a visit to a 1-year, $6 million deal with $5 million guaranteed. This was a very interesting signing to me, Noah. I've always been a fan of Sammy Watkins. Unfortunately, he is one of those guys who has shown us flashes of his talent and how great he can be. Unfortunately, he hasn't really been able to stay healthy and stay on the field all that much. He's definitely been a guy who struggled with injuries and, as I said, staying on the field. And I'll agree, Baltimore definitely needed a number 1 receiver, Noah. And I do like this signing to agree. However, I'll be the first one to tell you that this wasn't, who they needed to get their number 1 wide receiver. He's not young. He's a veteran guy. And as I said, obviously injuries, are a big issue for him. So, I'm glad they brought him in. Obviously he's going to be a boost to that team. However, like I said, I am baffled a little bit that they let guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, Allen Robinson, some of these other guys who are a little bit younger, able to stay healthy, and play in more games, pass up, and, then they bring in a guy like Sammy Watkins. What were your thoughts when you saw that, Noah?
I think I'm kind of with you, Garth. I think it's a weird move. I'm not saying it's a bad move or anything, but I think the positives are that it's only 1 year, $6 million. So, it's not a long-term contract. It's not very expensive or anything like that. The negatives are what you said. Obviously he's had some problems with missing some games. He only played in 10 games last season. He hasn't started 16 games since his rookie year. And even when he's healthy, Garth, and I don't know if you disagree or anything, I don't think he's the number 1 receiver. I think he's very fast. I think he can be a weapon if he can stay healthy, but he's only had 1,000 yard career, 1,000 yard season in his career. Excuse me. He's not exactly a guy who's consistently, lighting up defenses when he plays. He makes some plays. He's very fast. He is a threat. I don't think he's a number one receiver, though. And I think if that's what Baltimore wants from him, I think they're going to be disappointed, and he'll probably hit free agency again next offseason. Now, he's going to be 28 in June, so, it's not like this is some 35-year-old guy that just signed like a Deshaun Jackson or whatever. He still can play, and if he does well, he can stay there. But I think, like you kind of alluded to, we're going to see maybe he gets banged up again, or even if he does play, I don't think you're going to see him be a number one receiver. I think they tried to get that, and with Juju Smith-Schuster, but he took a massive discount to stay in Pittsburgh. And in my opinion, I don't even think Juju's the number one anyway. And I think the other guys, Kenny Galladay, he went to the Giants. Allen Robinson is still with the Bears. So, yeah, I think that if they want a number one receiver with Sammy Watkins, I think they're going to be disappointed. And, I like him as a player, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and as I said, I gotta agree fully. He's definitely a guy who's going to be able to have an impact for them. Number one wide receiver, no. And I hope that he can stay on the field because obviously, I wish that all players could stay healthy. Injuries suck. But yeah, obviously look for the Ravens to potentially draft somebody. There are a lot of wide receivers in this class that I do like. A lot of guys with a lot of potential and upside as we're seeing as these pro days progress, and we're seeing more and more players showcase their speeds and their talents. So definitely look for the Ravens to add somebody in the draft. I mean, if they're sold on Lamar Jackson, if this is for sure their guy long term, they obviously got to get him more weapons because let's be real, has he been the greatest passer? Definitely not. But there is some truth to he hasn't had a number one wide receiver. He hasn't had this impressive supporting cast throughout his career. I will say he's had pretty good. They've always done a really good job running the ball. Defense has always been there in Baltimore, although we've have seen some struggles recently. But if this is their guy, they got to go all in. They're definitely a team that's in position to win now versus a full rebuild. So I definitely expect them to add somebody come draft time.
No, I'm with you, Garth, because in my opinion, their biggest receiving threat isn't a wide receiver; it's their tight end, Mark Andrews. And I think Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, he's kind of like, I'm not saying I think he's better than Sammy Watkins, but I kind of see the same thing with him, where I'm not sure he's going to be a true number one receiver. I kind of see him more as a deep threat. I think they need another guy there because when you look past it, just looking at their 2020 roster from last season, other than Brown and Andrews, they had guys like Willie Snead, who I just saw went to the Raiders today. Devin Duvernay, who I think in my opinion is more of a good returner. And other than that, I mean Miles Boykin, he scored 4 touchdowns, but he only had 19 catches all year. So I definitely agree with you. They need another wide receiver. Lamar Jackson needs to take a step in his game because I think he's a fantastic player. Everyone knows I love Lamar Jackson, but he needs work to do. He has work to do, pretty much. So we'll see what he does. He has a good weapon now. I don't think it's a great weapon, but it is a good weapon in Sammy Watkins. So hopefully he does well.
Yeah, and Daniel adding here that Hollywood Brown would be fine if he didn't drop so many passes. You do make a fair point there, Daniel. Obviously, we've seen a lot of big-time throws dropped by him, unfortunately. And, if that is a weakness there that he could work on, that would definitely be huge. I still don't know if he's a true number one wide receiver in the league, though. Obviously, we got to wait and see because, to me, a true number one wide receiver in the league, yes, they make mistakes. We all do. We're all human. But, they don't do it on a consistent basis. They always, tend to outshine the rest and definitely come up big when, it matters most. So we got to see some improvement from him. But going back here, there was a comment here that I want to touch on from Mike. And this is a really big controversial topic that we have going on in the NFL world right now. As we all know, Deshaun Watson, Texans have, let him down hugely. He wants out. He's been very verbal about that. And then all of a sudden, we have this, not only his future in football as far as leaving the Texans, but his future in general. As we've seen, Noah, some sexual harassment and assault allegations have come out. Multiple women at this point. I will say that I haven't, done like a ton of research and a ton of homework on this subject. By no means am I an expert. But, the way, and like I've said it all this week, the way I view it is if he is truly guilty, obviously he deserves some form of punishment. If he isn't guilty, then shame on these women because it sucks. You should never do that to somebody. But we're just going to have to wait and see what comes of this as, day by day, we're getting more information and eventually everything will come to light on that whole situation.
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail, Garth, because obviously this is a very serious matter, and we can have our opinions on it and all that, but the fact is, none of us know what has truly happened at this point. He is innocent until proven guilty. We need to let the process play out. I think you're going to see either one or two things. A, he's guilty, and that means he's done some terrible things. He needs a punishment for that because if what is alleged is true, that's not okay. Or B, which is what a lot of people think, that it's a bit of a conspiracy, that some of the women are making it up. Um, then I mean, he's innocent, and I think that's terrible to do to somebody. I don't want to go into too much depth, but I think people that lie about serious stuff like that, they actually make it a bit harder for actual victims to speak up about it, because no one will believe them. They think they're lying. Um, we've seen a lot of cases, and I even had a player on the Falcons a few years ago, Brian Banks, who was accused of rape. He did not do it. Um, the lady came out and admitted that she lied about it. He lost his career because of it, and you can't get that stuff back, Garth. So I really hope they're not lying about it, because if they did, that's very severe. And like I said, I don't want to go in depth on it, but that's not something you lie about. It really isn't. You can lie about something minor. Okay, that's fine. To lie about something that's serious and potentially ruin somebody's life, that's not okay. And I hope it's not true. Um, but if it isn't, I'd also be very disappointed that they would lie about it. But like I said, none of us know what has really happened so far. I don't want to really make a judgment this early on, because if I do and it turns out it's the exact opposite, you look like an idiot. So just let it play out is what I'd say.
Right. Not, I got to agree completely there with, like you said, we for sure don't know what has or hasn't happened yet. We're just gonna have to wait and, let the process run its time and have everything come to light, as I said. Actually got some breaking news coming in here now. I just got a notification on my phone. My Chargers have signed veteran QB Chase Daniel for a 1-year deal worth $1.5 million. That does reunite him with his former coach Brandon Staley and Joe Lombardi. And from what Adam Schefter is reporting, that the whole goal of that is obviously you're bringing a guy who is potentially a solid backup for you. Obviously, Justin Herbert is the guy moving forward after last season's performance. And two, this is a guy that the coaching staff has tremendous, experience and respect for. And it's a low money deal. What this shows to me, is unfortunately our guy Easton Stick is, probably going to be a career backup, career practice squad guy unless something drastically changes. And unfortunately, that kind of sucks guy I am really rooting for. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm definitely not upset. It's low money. We still have a ton of room in cap. He would be a quality backup if God forbid something did happen to Herbert. But yeah, definitely not upset there, Noah. But with that, I guess let's use that to jump right into my team. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it tonight, as I always say. I don't like to invest a ton of the show into my favorite team. I like to, touch on everything going on around the league. But my Chargers finally get some offensive line help in there, Noah, in the form of, proven guys. Obviously, the first signing was Corey Linsley out of Green Bay, making him the highest paid center in the NFL. This is a guy who has played at a very, very high level and stayed healthy. Obviously, doing things like calling the protection schemes for the offensive line there in Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers. So, for me as a Chargers fan who for weeks has been preaching, please don't do the same thing to Justin Herbert that we did to Phillip Rivers. I absolutely loved that move. I loved the investment. Unfortunately, Pouncey is gone, but that was coming. He is aging. But yeah, no, that made me very excited. Then we invested in a couple other guys, just to strengthen up that offensive line. And really, all we have left is to get our franchise left tackle. All the signs are pointing to first round of the draft, which Me personally, obviously Penny Sewell is more than likely not going to be available at number 13. Just hoping that Rashawn Slater can fall to us at number 13. But just really excited that we're finally investing in some offensive line there, Noah.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think that was a fantastic signing by the Chargers to get Corey Lindsey. I think he's a very good football player. He has been for quite a few years. I think he's still relatively young as well. I'm just gonna look it up real quick. He's only 29, which for an offensive lineman, Garth, this was a guy who was a first team All Pro last year. It's not like he's just had a down year or something like this. This is a really good player you just got. Obviously he's the highest paid center in the league now, but first team All Pro, you get what you pay for, hopefully. So I think that's a really good deal. They also signed Matt Flower from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now I don't know as much about him. I think he's a respectable player. I haven't heard Steelers fans complaining about him that much or anything like that. He's been in the league since 2014 as an undrafted free agent. He's 28 years old. Started 40 games in his career, so I guess he's a pretty good player. He's got 3 years and 21 million. So good moves, and I think you guys also made another good move, and I'm sure you want to talk about this as well. I think getting Jared Cook for 1 year at 6 million, I think that's a solid move. I know he has issues with drops, and Saints fans have talked about that, but I think despite his age, and he is getting up there now, he's still a serviceable player. Even though he's 33, this is a guy that he can still get you, 500 to 750 yards, stuff like that. He's not going to be that guy that gets you 1,000-yard season. He's never had one in his career, but he could probably get you 5, 6, 700 yards. And he's a good touchdown scorer, Garth. He's got 22 touchdowns the last 3 seasons. That is some solid production for a tight end. So I think that's a good move as well. I think the Chargers have made some really good moves. And obviously, like you said, with my Falcons, I don't know. I'm not an expert on the Chargers, but on the outside looking in, I think these are some good signings that they've made.
Yeah, and one other guy that we added is Ode Ibushi from the Detroit Lions. That was a signing that after I actually looked into it and did some research on, I'm a really big fan of. This is a guy who provides some versatility, should be playing at the guard position. He just plays with a lot of physicality, Noah, and that's one thing that I think the Chargers offensive unit as a whole has been lacking, really badly for the past several seasons. He just brings that grit to the offensive line. He's a guy who is going out there to punish defensive linemen and have those impact blocks. So, he's a guy that's a little bit under the radar, not an all pro by any means. But, he, like I said, he brings a grit, he brings a physicality to the offensive line. But as far as you said there, Jared Cook, me and my fellow Chargers fan, Drew, we were on Tuesday night with Brian and Mike over there on their show, Highly Opinionated, which if you guys haven't checked out yet, I do recommend going and checking them out. They put on a fantastic show every Tuesday night. 2 great guys right there. But, we got on there. We talked Chargers for a while. Jared Cook was one of the topics, as well as Hunter Henry. And I'll just kind of relay what I said there, and that Hunter Henry leaving, was expected. Unfortunately, he wanted a lot of money. The market demanded a lot of money, but the numbers weren't there to back up the money. And, like I said, we can't keep paying year in, year out for, well, he should do really good. He is capable of being a top tight end. If the numbers aren't there, like I said, the salary cap is huge. You can't be overpaying guys if you're trying to ultimately win a Super Bowl. So, like I said, I expected him to be leaving. We mentioned that on the show quite a bit. So I really like this Jared Cook signing, though. As you said, he is getting up there in age, but he is still a serviceable player. It's only a 1-year deal. We didn't really invest, like the whole house into him. And there's a guy that I mentioned on the show as well, Donald Parham. He's this really big, physically gifted guy. He's got some developing to do. He's very raw. He's very new to football in the NFL. So I'm really hoping that a guy like Jared Cook, an experienced veteran, can kind of take on that mentor role and help him, really come into his own and be potentially a number 1 tight end. So, like you said, no, very good signing, serviceable player, 1-year deal, not a lot invested into him. And he's going to be able to put up some numbers for us. I think that we needed another red zone threat outside of Keenan Allen. I feel like we're really good at moving the ball, but once we get inside the red zone, there isn't a lot of guys who are able to score. It's really, just the Keenan Allen show, and here and there, Austin Eckler or somebody like a Justin Jackson breaking free out of the backfield. Fortunately, guys like Jalen Guyton and Mike Williams are more of over-the-top deep ball threats. So, all around, I've really liked our free agency signing so far. Now I'm really happy as a Chargers fan and looking forward to the draft.
Yeah, and I can see why. I think these are some good signings. I think you mentioned a lot of players there that can make an impact. Obviously, Mike Williams and Jalen Guyton, they're good over the top. Um, Donald Parham, we'll see what he does. But yeah, I think Jared Cook, he's a solid, serviceable tight end. And I think the problem is, Garth, and you mentioned it, Hunter Henry, obviously, we haven't even talked about the Patriots. I'm sure we're going to get into that. But, he went to the New England Patriots 3 years, $37.5 million. That is a lot of money to pay for a tight end. And, this is a guy that has had consistent injury problems in his career. Even when he's played, I think he's just a pretty good tight end, not a great tight end that you get that type of money for. Um, I think the fact they let him go was good because, you just got a lineman in when you desperately need an offensive lineman that was a first team All Pro last year. And you got him on a 5-year deal. So if he plays well, he can be there and do well for a really long time. Like I said, I believe Corey Lindsey's only 29. And, they signed 3 linemen, Jared Cook. And, they had a good base to start with as well, Garth. It's not like the Chargers are a terrible team, in my opinion. I just think that they went 7-9. They had a couple games they let slip away. I can think of that week 2 game against the Chiefs. You guys played fantastically well. But unfortunately, you just had a slow second half. You lost that game. Just looking at a few more games, you lost to the Raiders by 5. You lost to the Broncos by 1. I remember that game. You lost on the very last play of the game. That was terrible. You had that game against the Saints where you missed a field goal and you lost in overtime. That's 4 games right there, Garth, you guys could have won. And I think with these they're not over the top signings, but they're really solid signings. Signing offensive lineman is never that sexy signing, but he's a great player. That's really going to help your offensive line. You signed those 2 other linemen as well in Fire and Obuchi. Jared Cook, obviously, they let Hunter Henry go. I think your cap is still relatively good as well. I don't have the numbers up right in front of me right now, but I think you guys are still doing well. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's looking really healthy for you guys. I think the sky is the limit. And you're going upward.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact number now without looking it up, but after that $1.5 million deal to Chase, we should be sitting somewhere around 26, 27 mil. So definitely, plenty of room, and it's only going to take, a small portion of that to sign whomever we do draft. But real quickly, and we're going to get into the Patriots because I'm glad you mentioned that. There's a lot to talk about with them and their free agent signings and their massive spending spree, which to some, may come by surprise because that is not the New England Patriots that we've come to know in that Bill Belichick, Tom Brady era. But real quickly, before we do jump into that, we seem to have a lot of news today. David commenting on the Marshawn Lattimore situation. For those of you who don't know, he was taken into custody on a stolen weapons charge, which if it holds up, that is a felony charge, 4th degree. So hopefully for Mino, I hope it was just kind of a misunderstanding, and he was just, taken into custody because that's the way the law works, but should he get prosecuted for it, that's not going to be good. Obviously, he won't be playing for the Saints if he does get prosecuted for a felony. So we're going to have to wait and see, just like with Deshaun Watson, how that plays out.
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, there's a lot of breaking news today. This was something that I think kind of flew a bit under the radar because Marshall Lattimore is a very good player. He's a very good corner. And, I don't know all the details. Like you said, we kind of have to wait and see. But if he's bonding out, hopefully it's not that severe. But it's definitely not something that it should be taken lightly. And that doesn't come from anywhere. And if it is true, there will be consequences for that. So, hopefully, he kind of gets that cleared up and he can get, his name cleared and all that because, while he's a Saint and, they're our biggest rival and all that, I do respect him a lot as a player. I think he's a fantastic player. You never want to see guys, doing stuff like this, you don't want to see guys getting in trouble. You just want to see them going out, having fun playing the game they love and making a lot of money doing it. So, like you said, it's kind of like Deshaun Watson. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, and with that, let's go ahead. Bradley with a comment to kick us off here. Patriots, and he says, and Jonnu. He's referring to Jonas Smith of his Tennessee Titans. This is a signing that, for me personally, Noah, really, really baffled me. And I pulled up the numbers here. I'm coming up with 4 years, $50 million. And then I go ahead and look at the stats here, Noah. He's been in the league since 2017. Last season, 41 receptions, 448 yards with 8 touchdowns. By no means is that a terrible season, but I believe he now is the 3rd highest paid tight end behind only George Kittle and Travis Kelce in the NFL. And on top of that, they went and spent all that money on Hunter Henry as well. Obviously, we're seeing that the Patriots want to get back to the double tight end sets of old with Aaron Hernandez and Gronkowski that they used to run there and absolutely dominate with. But man, is that a lot of money to me now? Not only for a team that normally doesn't spend and splurge in free agency, but for the specific player. And Bradley, go ahead and clarify in the comments, if there's some huge stat or some huge, performance, whatever that I'm missing that, helps justify this signing. But to me, no, that is a ton of money for that guy from New England.
It is, Garth. They spend a lot of money, and obviously we'll go into every sign in a little bit, but I found it awfully strange, and it is really hard for me to criticize Bill Belichick or anything like that. I think the Patriots will probably make the playoffs with all these signings, but it is very strange to me that they not only signed one tight end to a massive contract, but they signed 2, and both with $12.5 million a year with terms. So Jonnu Smith had 4 years, Hunter Henry had 3. They're paying $25 million every season for 2 tight ends for the next 3 years, and maybe if they keep Hunter Henry, it'll be even longer with that. I think what is going to happen, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they want to run more 2 tight end sets, like they did with obviously Gronkowski and Hernandez. Obviously, it's not going to be that good because those 2 players, in my opinion, were way better than these 2. But I think that's what they want to run because obviously they made the choice to keep Cam Newton. Now, I think that was a mistake personally, but the fact is they made that choice. He is going to be the starter in 2021. He's never been a guy that's had a fantastically accurate or powerful arm. He can throw a rocket every now and then, but his completion percentage on those aren't the best. This is a guy that last I checked, I believe his career completion percentage is something like 59.8%, which for the greatest passing error we've ever seen in the league, it's 60.1%. I don't think that's good enough. I think what they're doing is saying, okay, this guy can win us games with the team we have, but we need to give him some help. And by signing 2 tight ends, I think they want to run more 2 tight end sets. They don't exactly have what I think is a true number 1 receiver. I think they're going to be relying on these guys a lot in the passing game. And since Cam Newton, he's not a guy that in his age can, throw it 70 yards anymore, I think you're going to see the tight ends be used a lot in what I would say is probably a West Coast offense. They're going to have the running back by committee. Obviously, they're not going to have this, guy who's get 100 catches a season for 1,500 yards or something like that. They're going to be a team that relies on several players to do a job and combine together. And, we'll get into some more signings. I know they obviously also signed a receiver. That signing was very interesting as well. But, yeah, I mean, it's just really weird that they not only signed 1 tight end, but they signed 2. And like you said, I think they also overpaid for them, but Bill Belichick clearly doesn't care because, he barely spent any money in free agency throughout his career. And then he spent, almost close to that in one offseason. I don't have the exact stat. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was something like he spent $360 million in free agency throughout his entire career. And in this free agency, he spent, I'd say probably over $200 million. Which is pretty crazy if you think about it. But they've made a lot of signings. They clearly have made a statement that, hey, we had an off year, but we want to get back in the playoffs. And, it makes sense, but have they overspent for a few guys? I think they have.
Yeah, like I said, it's very definitely a big change up to see Bill Belichick and the Patriots, like I said, spending and splurging so much in free agency. One thing that you mentioned there, Noah, is running back by committee. They did re-ink James White to a 1-year deal, so they're going to keep him there. They have your Georgia Bulldogs, Sony Michel. So what this screams to me, and Bradley with a comment here adding that, Jonnu is a red zone threat, explosive, and great blocking. What this screams to me is they're going to play a lot more run first, play action pass style with 2 tight ends. Obviously, as we know, Cam isn't this electric quarterback that's going to absolutely shred you through the air every game. And I think we really, really saw that this past season with his time there in New England. So I think that they're going to try and get back to this very run dominant first offense where they can catch you badly on the play action here and there. And get back to just, a great offense and a great defense, I think is what they're trying to go for here. Not so much a great offense in terms of scoring and moving the ball up and down the field, no, but more so, efficiency, effectiveness. They're going to, keep ahead of the sticks, third and manageables, run the ball 20 to 30 times, even if it is by running back by committee, 2 tight end sets, as I said, play action. So, in a way, Bill Belichick, even though he did spend a lot, I think he's trying to get back to what worked so well when Brady was there. As you said, they did sign a wide receiver, so the skill positions are definitely improving for Cam Newton headed into the season. I don't know how much trust and faith I put into him still. I don't know. With Cam, I got to see it happen before I can believe in him, Noah. And unfortunately, the Bills have been very active in free agency. Have done a really, really good job of restructuring guys to keep them on the team and adding some guys as well. I just don't see the Patriots getting past the Bills now with the emergence of Josh Allen and how well they've done in free agency so far. Bill went after some guys. I don't see them getting past the Bills, Noah.
Well, Garth, a lot of people mention the Bills, and I get that. What about the Dolphins? They went 10-6 last year, and obviously we just talked about earlier in the show that they just made a great trade. They got 2 first-round picks that they can use to add to that roster, and they've got 5 in the next 3 years. They're not going anywhere. Brian Flores is a very good coach. I think the Patriots could make the playoffs. I understand what Mike is saying there. I'm not sold on Cam either, but I think they just signed so many players that they basically have to make the playoffs, Garth. You can't just spend over $200 million in free agency and miss the playoffs again. That's not going to fly. And if that happens, I honestly think Bill Belichick either might get fired or he might retire, because he's clearly shown that this is by far the most active he has ever been in free agency. He's trying to make a statement here. And, if it works, great. If it doesn't, there's going to be some change in New England. I would probably say that. And it's really hard for me to say that because this franchise, for as long as I've been alive, basically, has just been the epitome of excellence. But if they spend all this money and if it somehow doesn't work out, it's not going to be a good look at all. They've signed, obviously, Hunter Henry, Johnny Smith. I know they signed Matthew Judon, Nelson Aguilar, who's the receiver I mentioned. Jalen Mills they signed as well. Kyle Van Noy and Devon Gottschall. They have signed so many players, and not just expensive, Garth, but with term. These are guys who are getting 2, 3, and 4 year deals. They have clearly made an effort to try and not only win, but win for a few more years, even without Tom Brady. So, it's kind of like, I'd say it's high risk, but it's also high reward. But, if it doesn't work out, they have a lot of contracts here, Garth, that are really expensive and with term. So they better hope it works out. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, they're definitely investing a lot into win now, despite who the players may be. Because they are, like you said, they're locking these guys up long term and they're spending a lot of money doing it. So, obviously from a front office standpoint, from a coaching standoff, their ultimate goal is to be winning now. And as you said, the Dolphins are right there in the mix. They've got a big NFL draft coming up. Free agency is still underway. And as I said, the Bills, and Daniel adding that they just signed Matt Breida today. I believe this was yesterday. I could be wrong, but regardless,
Yeah.
they signed Matt Breida. And our friend Mike Bradley, the big Bills fans that he is, he was a huge supporter of this. He was wanting an explosive, speedy guy in the backfield. Really liked the signing, really excited for it. I don't blame him at all. They kept John Brown, which was a guy who potentially could be leaving on the offensive side of the ball. And they have an emerging superstar potentially in Gabriel Davis. He looked absolutely fantastic. He put the nails in the coffin to the Colts on like 3 or 4 toe drag catches there in that NFL playoff game. I really like that guy. And obviously the season that Stephon Diggs just came off of, paired with a very solid veteran guy in Cole Beasley. So, there's just so much going on with that offense, Noah. And they just kept everybody on the defensive side of the ball. So that's got to be my pick to win that division head into the next season. As of right now, with the Miami Dolphins a close second, and Patriots are going to be there in the 3rd spot more than likely. It's going to take a lot, for them to bump their way up and win that. But Bradley's saying here, and this is a very good point. I really didn't think of this. He is mentioning that in Tennessee, he did have to compete with Henry, who obviously was the focal point of the offense, Brown and Davis, just to get the ball. So, if Jonnu is very talented, if he's going to be really good in New England, he definitely won't be having all these guys to compete with. He very well could have a good season. But just like I said, for a guy who hasn't had a very good season yet, that was a ton of money to put into him.
Well, I think that is an interesting point for Brad, but I also think it's a bit of a two-edged sword. Sure, you could say, okay, he's split a lot of time with people. We don't really know what he's capable of, but you could also use that as a negative. Do you think he could be a focal point of an offense if he hasn't had that before, if he hasn't had that level of dependency on him, and if he hasn't been relied on that much? And I think that's what you're going to see in New England, in my opinion. I think Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith are going to be very important in that offense because, sure, they signed Nelson Aguilar, but even then, that signing is a little bit to me. I think it's interesting. I think he's bounced back a little bit, but is he still a number one? No. Other than that, you're looking at guys like Jacoby Myers and Demir Bird, who were their leading receivers last season. That's not going to cut it at all. So they're going to rely on those tight ends a lot. I'd say that, and you will see what he's capable of for sure. Whether good or bad, you will see what John Smith is truly capable of. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Like you said, the Bills did such a great job because they kept pretty much everyone on the team, and they still made some savvy signings. You mentioned Matt Breida. I know they signed Darrell Williams, John Feliciano. They re-signed Matt Milano. They made some good moves. They re-signed Micah Hyde as well, who's one of their best players on defense. They basically, made a few signings here and there, but have kept all their really good players. So I don't see any reason why that they would lose the division. I think the Dolphins and Patriots will make it interesting. But in my opinion, you're going to see the Bills win the division. I'd say the Dolphins and Patriots will fight it out for number 2. And then, the Jets are just don't even mention them. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be a very good division. You might see 3 playoff teams from that division, especially with 7 teams. I could definitely see, the Bills, Dolphins, and Patriots all making the playoffs. But it should be a good division. The AFC as a whole was fantastic last season. Hence why the Miami Dolphins had 10 wins and they didn't make the playoffs when there were 7 teams that made it. That's just insane. So, yeah, the AFC is going to be very strong this year.
Yeah, it's just kind of mind-boggling to me. Just fantastic moves by the front office, despite a salary cap crunch year, to be able to keep everybody and make a few signings there in Buffalo. But another team, Noah, that I'm sure this is always a love-hate topic because it does involve Tom Brady. Another team that was able to keep everybody together is a rival of your Atlanta Falcons, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, Tom Brady's coming back, and so is everybody else on that team. And my take on that is last year they had a little bit of a slow start. They definitely heated up as the season, came to its end. This year, this is a team that's played together a whole season. They just won a Super Bowl. Tom Brady's at the helm, who somehow Father Age has not caught up with him yet, Noah. I don't see – anything's possible in the NFL, but having a full offseason, obviously we're still dealing with COVID, but it's not stopping teams from having a full offseason, in-person workouts, all that stuff that we didn't have last season. I don't see them having that same type of slow start. This is a team that potentially is going to set themselves up very, very well to be a number 1, number 2, number 3 seed in the NFC, depending on things, how things play out. They're going to be giving themselves a really, really good shot at returning to the Super Bowl. And I know Tom Brady wants another ring more than anything, as we, seems like we keep seeing him year in, year out there in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, my God, man, this is just incredible. And obviously, like you said, as a Falcons fan, it just sucks to see, but you got to give them credit, man. Obviously, they finished the season red hot. They won 4 straight to close out the regular season. Then, obviously, they went all the way to win a Super Bowl. But I just think it's fantastic by their management. And, I've criticized their management a lot in the past. I think they've had some good teams and just kind of, squandered it, basically. But they re-signed pretty much all their key players, Garth. I'm just looking over the list now of all their free agents. Andrew Adams and Joe Haig, are the only 2 guys they lost to free agency. Those are not going to be, massive losses, but they re-signed Shaq Barrett to 4 years, $72 million. I just saw today, actually, that they re-signed Leonard Fournette Now, I know we discussed him in the past. We weren't very high on him, but I think he was very key to their Super Bowl run. And the fact they got him on a 1-year contract for about $4 million total, I think is a really good deal for them. Obviously, they franchise tag Chris Godwin. They re-signed Levante David, who's a really good linebacker for them. Gronkowski's coming back. And Ndamukong Suh, they pretty much got everybody back. And, obviously Tom Brady's still there. And, you can't count out Tom Brady at all. Yeah, it sucks to say, but I think they are probably the favorites for the South. No, I think the Saints will make it interesting, but it's hard for me to say that the defending Super Bowl champions aren't the favorite for that division. And obviously, they got to be a favorite coming out of the NFC and even the Super Bowl. Now, would I predict them to go back to back? That's very tough for a team to do. I don't know if I'd say that, but they'll definitely be in the mix. Yeah, I see, probably an 11-5 or 12-4 type of team right here. This is easily the best Buccaneers team I've seen in my life. I wasn't old enough to remember when they won the Super Bowl with John Gruden, but I mean, yeah, they're definitely going to be very good this year. Now we'll see what they do when Tom Brady leaves, how they deal with that. But until then, they're very good and they have a lot of pieces.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be very hard to pick and bet against them. And for me with the Saints, the biggest question mark, obviously, with Drew Brees' retirement is going to be the quarterback situation, as well as they are still, they're making a lot of progress, but they are still dealing with that whole cap situation. I don't know exactly where they stand at, but I don't believe they're quite under the cap yet. They still, got to either cut some guys or do some major restructuring. And they still got the draft where they got to draft guys and sign them to contracts. So, just that combination, having to let, some key guys go potentially. And obviously the impact that not having Drew Brees is going to have. Jameis has shown his flashes, but he's not Drew Brees. Taysom Hill, we're going to have to, if he's the guy, we're going to have to see what he can do as a starter for the length of a season. There's just, for right now, there's too many question marks at the quarterback position for me to say that the Saints can win this division over Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. But with that said, a topic that I actually didn't even think about talking tonight, and it's definitely one worth discussing. Mike with a comment here saying that the Cardinals should trade Murray and some draft picks for Watson, and they would be a serious contender in the NFC. I will admit that I've been a very, very big critic of Kyler Murray so far, Noah, throughout college, coming into the draft and what he was going to be able to do in the NFL. But I don't think that this team needs to trade away Kyler Murray for Deshaun Watson to be a serious contender. I mean, they've been adding some pieces. They're another team that's been very active in free agency, adding some key guys in there. This is a team that, that division is absolutely loaded, Noah. It's very, very competitive. As we said, 49ers will be coming back healthy, most likely improved team. Obviously, Seattle, despite some of the woes they've had, they still always seem to be tough. And the Cardinals. It's going to be a tough division, and I'll just say one more time, I don't think that they have to get rid of Kyler Murray to be, competitive in their division and potentially the playoffs as well.
The thing is, Garth, year 3 for a lot of quarterbacks is actually where you kind of start to see how good they are. Obviously the rookie year and the sophomore year, those are kind of, they're finding their way in the NFL. But Kyler Murray, from what I've seen from him, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I wasn't too high on him coming out. He showed me a lot his rookie year, and I think he did improve in year 2. Now, does he have a lot of work to do? Absolutely. I don't think he's elite by any means. I'd say he's probably, a top 15 type quarterback. He's a good passer. He's a good player. He has a lot of athleticism, obviously, but he has work to do. And I think the thing is, Garth, you do not spend a number 1 pick on a player, unless you're just really stupid, and then just give up on him after 2 years. Now, do I think Deshaun Watson's better than Kyler Murray? Absolutely. I think you also have to account for the dead cap, which a lot of people don't think about. They'd have to take up $20.7 million in dead cap to trade away Kyler Murray for Deshaun Watson, which is not going to help the cap situation. Obviously, they'd probably go well over the cap, considering I'm looking at their numbers right now, and they are, I'm pretty sure, they're already over the cap by $8 million, so they'd be about $30 million over after that. And then, like we mentioned earlier, what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson? We don't know. So they'd have to give up a lot for that. Now, if it did happen, I'd say, they made an upgraded not wide receiver, at quarterback, but I don't know. I don't think they should give up on Kyler Murray. I think they're already a good team with Kyler Murray. they went 8-8 last season. I think if some of those games went a bit more their way, they could have made the playoffs because they started the season really well, Garth. We had people saying Kyler Murray was an MVP candidate. Now, I was never on that train. I didn't think he was, but he did start very well. And if he can do that more consistently, that is a good team they have.
Yeah, and from what I know, he did get banged up, was dealing with some injuries towards, the latter part of the season. So that potentially could have held him back. But, like I said, they definitely, and as you said as well, they definitely shouldn't give up on Kyler yet. They did invest that number one overall pick on him, and by no means has he played to a point where you're like, God, we got to get rid of this guy. He's just not working out. So, definitely another full season of Kyler there in Arizona with a little bit of an improved roster and, potentially improved players as another offseason under their belt. And Brad adding that they did get J.J. Watt and Malcolm Butler. Yep, two veteran guys to help lead that defense. Watt and Chandler Jones, that's going to be a really, really good combination there on the defensive front. Potentially one of the best pass rushing duos in the league, depending on if Watt can stay healthy or not. But yeah, that's a team that's going to be very tough in the NFC, whether they make playoffs or not. They're going to be a team that plays everybody hard week in, week out, and it's going to be a team that you cannot overlook on your schedule. Are they going to make playoffs? I don't know yet. I got to wait till we get a little bit closer to season, what happens with the draft and, anything more in free agents. They're definitely going to be a tough team, Noah. Don't count these guys out. That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, and I think we discussed them a few weeks ago when we mentioned the J.J. Watt signing, Garth, and my take on it then was I don't think that they're going to win a Super Bowl or anything like that, and that's why I think J.J. Watt wanted to sign there. But I absolutely think they can make the playoffs because obviously they're a good team. It's just a few years ago when they had Carson Palmer and stuff like that, they were one of the best teams in the NFC. They still have a base there, and I was not a fan of the Cliff Kingsbury signing. I think with him and Kyler Murray, they could have something special there if he can really develop because I think he's a special talent. Like you said, has he, played so badly that you want to replace him? Absolutely not. He improved in year two. He was pretty good. Hey Ryan, he has some work to do, but I wouldn't give up on him just yet. I think they are a good team. Like you said, don't take them lightly. I don't see them as a Super Bowl contender or anything like that, but they will be a good team. They're a team that you can't overlook on that schedule at all. We'll see what they do. And like you said, that division is very interesting with obviously the Rams and Seahawks there. We'll see what the 49ers do with that number 3 pick. They were just in the Super Bowl just, a year ago. So that's going to be a very interesting division as well.
Yeah, and as Ryan's saying, you definitely don't trade Kyler. Was a sophomore, didn't part of the development period. Yeah, and that's what we're getting at for sure. Like I said, I do believe that what I heard was he was battling with some injuries in the latter part of the season. He did start off red hot, so if you get a full season out of him, how he played in the first half, definitely a playoff material team. But with that said, I'm going to shift gears here, Noah. We're going to talk about some motorsports real quickly before I wrap us up here for the night. Big event coming up this weekend, big race. Not only, actually, I was going to mention just Formula One, but also for those of you who are motorsports fans, NASCAR is racing on dirt all weekend in all 3 series. So that's just, a really cool fact for you guys there in Bristol. But yeah, Noah, this weekend, Formula One is back. I'm really excited for it. I know you are as well. We've talked a little bit about it here the past couple of weeks as we're amping up, getting ready for this. Obviously, we're going to have to see what can happen. As we always say, Lewis Hamilton is becoming the greatest of all time right before our eyes, and there are a few guys in Bottas and Verstappen trying to hunt him down and get some wins. But man, does it feel good to have Formula One back? No, it seems like it's kind of been a really long time, even though it's only been several months. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I know you're right. That race was only in December or something like that, and yet it feels like forever. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, we had winter testing last week at Bahrain, and that's actually where this first race is. I thought it was Australia, but apparently got rescheduled. So, we're opening in Bahrain, which is one of my favorite tracks, honestly. I love Bahrain. But, the fact they did winter testing, Garth, there, I think it's very interesting. Just looking at times right now, your guy, Max Verstappen, he was actually number 1, but you don't put so much stock in testing, Garth, because it does show some things. I think the fact the racing points were 17th and 18th with Vettel and Stroll, that's not good enough. They have to get that going. But I think the thing we've seen a lot with Mercedes over the past few years, and obviously like you, I've only heavily got into Formula One recently, but I've always heard Mercedes won't do well in testing. They're kind of sandbagging it, and then when the season comes, they just blow everybody out of the water. So I'm not going to overreact just yet because Max Verstappen was top of testing. Lewis Hamilton was fifth, and I believe Bottas he was 16th. So that's definitely not representative. He's way higher than that. So I'm just going to remain reserved for right now. Like I think as a neutral, I'm not really I like certain drivers like I like Vettel. I love Pierre Gasly, but I'm not really one of those guys that kind of looks at a team. And I know you're kind of like this with Red Bull. I'm not really a guy that supports a team. I support drivers. But I would like to have a competitive season because everyone knows like Lewis Hamilton. We talked about him a lot. I think he's the greatest of all time. His level of dominance is just remarkable. But as a neutral fan, I would like to see it be a little closer than Lewis Hamilton winning 2/3 of the races, and most of the ones he won weren't even his fault. It was something else that happened. So hopefully Verstappen can take that next step. I like Bottas, but I don't think he can ever match Hamilton in the same car. I just think that Hamilton is so good. And, obviously the team has a bit of favoritism for it, and that's nothing against Hamilton. But, when a guy's that good, you're going to have priority for him. Now, I did see something, and, I don't know if you watched it, Garth, but there is that Drive to Survive on Netflix. And I think the thing that was really telling to me, and I didn't watch it, but I heard about this, it really shows you where Mercedes focuses because they showed a clip where Valtteri Bottas, he won that Russia Grand Prix. Nobody celebrated with him at all in the paddock after the race. He was all by himself. Every time Lewis Hamilton, wins, the team is going crazy and all that. And I think when a guy wins a race like that, and he's in a room by himself after he's won, he says, where is everybody? I think that really tells you where Mercedes loyalty is at. And there's it's sad, but you can understand it as well because Lewis Hamilton's so great. So I'm sure we'll talk a bit more in depth throughout the year, but until I say otherwise, I'm going to predict Lewis Hamilton to win it all, and hopefully someone can keep it close.
Yeah, much like Tom Brady in the NFL, it's very, very hard to bet against Lewis Hamilton with the dominance year in, year out we've seen from him lately. One thing, that excited me a little bit, Noah, is Charles Leclerc seemed to be really excited with, I know he didn't really have the free practice 2 that he wanted to have, but that first practice session, he looked very good, looked very comfortable in the Ferrari. I'm really excited to see what he can do this season. I'm not really the biggest fan of the Ferrari team as a whole, but like you said, I'm more a guy who roots for drivers versus teams anyways. And this is a guy that, for whatever reason, I've always kind of rooted for in my short time of watching Formula One. So I'm hoping that he can be competitive this year. I don't know if he's going to get any, race wins or that, but, hopefully he can run up towards the front. He can put some pressure on, guys like Verstappen and Bottas and Hamilton. I would no way be upset if he were competing, towards the front of the pack as, the season progresses. But yeah, what a great weekend of motorsports we have, guys. Obviously, Formula One, as I said, Supercross as always is on tomorrow night. We also have MotoGP as well, Noah, kicking off.
Yep.
And as I said, NASCAR, Truck Series, all of that is going to be racing on dirt all this weekend. Something that if you watch NASCAR at all, guys, or if you haven't, it's a really cool change of pace to see out of them. So, just a phenomenal weekend coming up for sports for us, Noah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be insane, man. Obviously, I'm going to be more focused on Formula One because that is my favorite, but I'm also going to, probably watch the MotoGP highlights, keep up with the Supercross. Personally, not into NASCAR that lot, but if they're raced on dirt, I might actually keep an eye on that because I do like dirt racing. But yeah, I'm kind of with you, Garth. I'm not a big fan of Ferrari. I think they're a team that, look, I respect the history and all that. They're the most successful team in Formula One history, but I just think from what you see in the past few years, they have this habit of wearing their drivers down. Sebastian Vettel, a 4-time world champion, he just looked miserable at the end of that season. It was going horrible for him. He just did not look comfortable at all. We saw it with Fernando Alonso, who obviously is a 2-time champion as well. He wanted out of there too. Kimi Räikkönen, who's also a champion, he just didn't want to be there at all at the end either. I do like Charles Leclerc, but that team is just – it feels like a bit of a tainted chalice at this point, in my opinion. I think that getting Carlos Sainz in there was a good move. because he finished, he's a really good driver. He finished third and went to testing. Like I said, temper expectations winter testing, but they might show a little bit of something. Um, but this is a team that's shown at points they can compete with Mercedes. They're about the only team who has done it. When they had Sebastian Vettel and he was at his height, he was the only one who came close to Lewis Hamilton. Obviously he lost out all those times, but he did keep it close. In 2019, I remember when they had Vettel and Leclerc, they had a streak of about 3 races where they won all the races. They were 1 and 2 in qualifying in pretty much every race, and then last season it just fell off a cliff. So can they rebound? You also have to keep in mind, your guys at Red Bull with Verstappen and getting Perez, I think was a really good signing. But obviously it's hard to bet against Mercedes, but I'm kind of hopeful maybe someone can take that next step because, it is nice to see a little bit of dominance, but you also want to see, you don't want the season to be over, halfway through.
Yeah, and for you guys who don't already know, due to the difference in time, it is kind of a, at least for me personally, I find it's a really cool point in time when these races are televised for Formula One. They are usually somewhere, 8, 9 a.m. Sunday mornings. So, for me, somebody who doesn't, ever work Sundays except for super rare occasion, it's really fun to just wake up Sunday mornings, get a cup of coffee, get some food, whatever it is that you guys, enjoy on your days off or when you're just hanging around the house and, throw on some Formula One. And, another sport that I really love, Supercross. They actually just did a poll, Noah, and they asked them, if you couldn't be a pro Supercross racer, what other sport would you like to be a pro in? And shockingly enough, number 1 voted on was Formula One. So I found that pretty cool. There is a ton of guys who love Formula One, and it isn't just the Euro riders. Like I know Ken Roxon is a huge Formula One fan, but even the American riders. So that's a really cool parallel between the two sports. But like I said, Noah, just a really, really good weekend for motorsports for any of you guys viewing us that are big fans of motorsports. Go ahead and tune in. Like I said, Supercross Saturday night, Formula One you can find more than likely on ESPN Sunday morning. MotoGP, I'm not entirely sure. NASCAR is always, throughout the whole weekend. But real quick, before I go ahead and close this off, Noah, I got to do one shout out. I did wear the hat. I did wear the shirt tonight just for this one reason. This guy right here, Andrei Vasilevsky, is on a 12-win streak as a starter for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know if they're playing tonight. Honestly, did not check. I don't believe so. I think they are off tonight. Could be wrong there. But, what a run by him. And, as we've said for the past few weeks now, Tampa Bay Lightning are just, asserting their dominance so far in this NHL season now.
Yeah, I mean, Vasilevsky's been absolutely fantastic. He's honestly having a career year. And considering, he's had some really good seasons before, he obviously won a Vezina in 2018-19, a 932 save percentage, a 1.91 goals against average, you put a team, and, obviously we've talked about the Lightning a lot. I think we're both pretty consensus. I think they're the favorites by far to repeat, but, you put a team with that quality and all the players, Stamkos, Kucherov. I know you mentioned Braden Point earlier in the show. They kept pretty much everyone from last season. And then, your goalie, Andrei Vasilevsky, who's very good, gets hot like that. It's going to be very tough to beat them. And, I know they played the Panthers about a week ago. They managed to beat them. That was a really big win for them because the Panthers have been on absolute fire. But I think once the Lightning beat them, that should give them a bit of a comfort zone, if you will. So, yeah, I think they'll definitely win the division, and I definitely have them as a favorite for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, as a Lightning fan, it's just, really refreshing that we're not having a slump coming out the championship. And as you said, it is a career year for Vasilevsky as he is averaging better numbers than his career averages. But with that said, Noah, unfortunately, as always, I do have to work tomorrow morning. I had a really, really good time tonight. We had some really good interaction with you guys. Lots of good comments coming in, keeping us on topic, giving us a lot to talk about, and, shifting gears, trying to cover as much as possible in this hour and a half that we get on here every Friday night. And just a huge thank you for both Noah coming on with me as always, and everybody who tuned in tonight. You can look forward to us Friday nights right around 9 p.m. And we just look forward to having you guys each and every week. And, go like us over there on the Sweet Tea page. Go visit Sports Box Group if you guys haven't checked them out yet. They're a really awesome group. And just tell your friends about us. We look to continue to grow each and every week.
Absolutely, man. I've told you several times, I kind of want to make this into a bit of a thing, a side career potentially, because I do really enjoy doing it. I love talking about sports. And, we've obviously been in sport life for quite a few years now. It's great talking to you guys, but to actually do it through voice is a lot easier, in my opinion, than trying to do it typing and all that. So, I really enjoy it. Special thanks to Brian for giving us the platform on the Sports Box, obviously. Special thanks to Crowdplay for sponsoring the show as well. And of course, the most special thanks of all has to go to the fans, because without them, it just be me and you awkwardly talking to each other. And, I do love talking to you, don't get me wrong, but the fans make it, 10 times better with the interaction, all that. That's what it's all about. That's what sports are all about, conversations about all this stuff. It gets us all fired up, as I'm sure you love. And, I just had a great time once again.
Yeah, and one last thing, Noah. I know we've talked about it a little bit. I would really like to start getting some guests on here, as we've gotten pretty good at doing this, and really comfortable putting on a show for you guys. If anybody is interested in coming on the show, we don't really, procrastinate against certain people or not. So, go ahead, shoot either one of us a message, comment on the page, whatever it is. If anybody's interested in coming in and talking some sports with us, let us know. We'd love to get you guys on here. But with that, Noah, thank you again for joining me tonight. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up, guys. Noah Dog Deibler and Garth Charger Patrick signing out here. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. See you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sweet Tea on the Sports Box. Please remember to follow us on all of our social media outlets. On Facebook at Sportsbox Show, Twitter at Sportsbox Show, Instagram at The Sportsbox Show. Find us on YouTube and join Outside the Box, our Facebook sports discussion group. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And also our friends over at Crowdplay. Download the free Crowdplay app today and use promo code THEBOX at sign up for 10 free points. Thank you for joining us.